And don't blame the WWF, because in just a few seconds, this show becomes WCW.
Indeed it does.
Hey, welcome to WrestleReward, the show that looks at whether the wrestle was worth the reward. Clever, right? I'm Justin, and today's special Spotlight episode covers the wrestling world coming full circle from Black Saturday in July 1984, where the WWF took over Georgia Championship Wrestling's WCW show with the story of WCW taking over WWF shows Raw, SmackDown, and Heat in July 2001. Much like the World Wrestling Federation being soundly rejected by loyal WCW viewers and the TBS network itself, WCW's return to the airwaves was met with similar disdain by Federation fans and its cable broadcaster, altering the course of history forever. I mean, every choice that we make alters history forever anyway, so that's true of literally everything in life, but still, Buff Bagwell screwed up a lot of stuff, and I don't just mean his 3 months of Twitter clout. Not a lot of people know this, but in March 2001, WCW's programming was cancelled by AOL Time Warner and the company was sold to Vince McMahon, ending the 5.5-year Monday Night War between Nitro and Raw and leaving the very fate of the wrestling industry in question. The immediate next step was Shane McMahon's turtleneck buying WCW from underneath his father's nose ahead of the WrestleMania X7 Clash just 6 days later, where WCW stars were seen, at least if you squinted really hard. 2 months later, the new logo smell of WCW penetrated the senses of the World Wrestling Federation with high-energy run-ins from an assortment of names, such as the former Triple Crown champion Lance Storm, huge erection Demott, and a positively mesmerizing walk-in from Stacy Keibler.
As you people are mesmerized by the greatest body in the world,
Tony, he's got them all mesmerized.
Even the former WCW World Champion Diamond Dallas Page arrived to enemy territory, though his priorities were slightly different than the others. Business picked up at June's King of the Ring when WCW World and US Champion Booker T put WWF Champion Steve Austin down through the Spanish announce table, a preview for the next night in the hallowed halls of Madison Square Garden where the WWF's Booker was laid out by WCW's. That same night also saw Mike Awesome become the first WCW wrestler to win a WWF title on Federation TV, the Hardcore Championship to be exact, defeating Rhino in the literal halls of MSG in something of a full circle moment. Putting aside that it was former ECW champion Mike Awesome defeating the final champion of the original ECW for the ECW-inspired belt in the same state both had won the gold, it also came just over a year after Taz returned to ECW as the first WWF wrestler to win the ECW championship by defeating WCW's Mike Awesome, who had jumped ship just 3 days earlier. Do you think I said ECW enough there? With all the Monday Night War animosity now bubbling back up to the surface, Linda McMahon informed her embattled husband Vince, whom she was in the midst of divorce with for being unfaithful, which is obviously just a storyline that would never happen for real, that July's premium live pay-per event would no longer be fully loaded, but rather a full-scale invasion. Not only that, but in the interest of equal time, Linda announced that Shane McMahon's WCW would receive dedicated segments within WWF programming, beginning with the following week's Raw's War on July 2nd from the Tacoma Dome in Washington. Wow, Linda's really fair and balanced with her two-party ruling. Maybe she's the kind of voice we need in Washington, D.C. to steer American politics back on Hold on, I'm looking at her Twitter, and okay, never mind, note to self, cut that last part out. The first WCW match on WWF TV would be the same one that was the first WCW match on a Federation Live event 24 hours earlier in Spokane, Booker T defending his WCW World Championship against Buff Daddy himself, Buff Bagwell. The two were no strangers to each other, having competed on opposite sides at least 67 times in WCW, including trading the tag team title on multiple occasions and even teaming up to challenge for it just a couple years earlier. Bagwell also found himself as a surprise favorite among WWF fans, receiving unexpected adulation when his name was brought up during Mr. McMahon's live focus group on the final Nitro.
Buff Bagwell up.
The first sign that Washington's welcome wouldn't be as warm as that of Cleveland, though, came in the night's opening segment, where the mention of Buff received a much different reaction.
Buff the Stuff Bagwell.
No matter, though, because the match is set, Booker T is fueled up with a Pepsi, and the time had arrived. It was officially Monday Night in America again because WCW had taken over Raw with its own graphics, ring skirt, referee, and announce team. Scott Hudson on play-by-play, Arn Anderson on color, and ring announcer Stacy Keibler, who was almost as sexy as David Pinzer. All systems were a-go, and it was now time for the first ever WCW World Championship match in WWF history.
History is in the making next. Buff Bagwell goes for the WWF Championship against Booker T.
Oh, Scott, now you know why Monty Brown hated you and wanted to pounce your mom.
I wouldn't care if it was your mother. We could walk her down on her little walker, put her in the ring. If she stands up and gets into a defensive position, you know what? Bam! Pounce!
Just before the match can begin, though, WCW owner Shane McMahon is kicked out of the arena by WWF Commissioner and a former WCW star himself, William Regal.
I mean, we've had to do some crazy things, Steve Regal, including put your ass over on TV.
Regal was acting as a figurehead leader at a time where Vince McMahon was under duress and had to funnel his authority through a close ally, which is again just something on TV that would never happen in real life. With all the pre-match preamble out of the way, including some support for Booker T in the crowd, Buff Bagwell jump-starts the contest by jumping Book, even landing an early DD Booker T.
It's a sign of the times. It's a sign of the times.
Cause some came in the mail today. Yeah, I did. These nuts. Got him!
Like a nervous cashier when you've maxed out your credit card, Booker declines Bagwell's charge and keeps his foot elevated for a spin kick that unfortunately sees Booker tumble down like Tumblr when they ban nudity. Arn Anderson gets ahead of the curve by 20 years talking about the forbidden doorness that is WCW on Federation Airways, but maybe it should have stayed forbidden with how badly Buff dropping Booker into the turnbuckle looks. Buff does hit a solid neckbreaker though. Maybe the crowd's finally coming around.
Making an excellent showing. Buff Bagwell has turned the tide already.
Neckbreaker from Buff Bagwell, a man who has held the tag team titles of...
Buff tries to dance away the pain and hatches a scheme to win the crowd over, a rest hold. Booker tries to make something interesting happen, but Buff Daddy shows Booker who is Daddy with a wingspan stretch knee in the back. Booker fights out for a dropkick that Buff awkwardly hangs onto the rope for as he falls, and I really wish Scott Hudson didn't pick this moment to talk about this match being a showcase for the best that WCW has to offer. Booker follows up with just one leg coming down for an axe kick and a spin Rooney to celebrate this match almost being over, as signaled by the run-in that wins this episode's Road Warrior Pop Award for biggest crowd reaction.
Oh God, that's Austin!
What the hell?
That's Austin! No! Shut up!
From an award honoring crowd satisfaction to one honoring the complete opposite, this match wins the Saturday special for worst WCW match of the 4 that would transpire this week. It checked off just about every box you'd hope stays unchecked, especially for both the pilot of a new project and also a match only 5 minutes in length that should have been nearly as disastrous as it was. On we go with the disasters as we check in backstage with WCW's Tori Wilson, hoping to convince her way into a job with the WWF. It was the latest in a night-long thread of skits where Vince kept being foiled in his latest attempt at an extramarital affair with a would-be employee he'd give money to after, another crazy story you'd only see happen on TV. Tori comes dangerously close to putting Vince's Kiss My Ass Club in a whole new context before telling him to close his eyes for a surprise, which turns out to be the very not Tori Wilson, Linda McMahon. Vince falls down with his pants around his ankles like an 80s teen sex comedy as we go from one back door to another, this time the Tacoma Dome where WCW's heavyweight champion of the world is thrown out like the trash. That's exactly what Angle and Austin agree Buff Bagwell is, and he's also thrown out despite helping them, proving to be an omen of things soon to come as Raw's War mercifully fades to black. Take-Two isn't just WWE's video game maker, it's also what we get on Thursday's UPN SmackDown, starting with Booker re-entering the doors he was thrown out of and being greeted by a very hatted Hardcore Holly, who eventually lets him through to be scared like I was by the cursed image of #GoateeGodfather. We also see the two referee locker rooms come to blows to begin what was legitimately one of the best feuds of the Invasion angle, and I don't mean that as faint praise, Earl Hebner versus Nick Patrick. Back to the in-ring action we go with another championship on the line, this time the Cruiserweight, pitting one half of the second and final Cruiserweight Tag Team Champions Billy Kidman, who won that title in the final episode of Nitro against the man who won his first Cruiserweight Championship at WCW's final pay-per-view Greed, Sugar Shane Helms. Except he can't be Shane since WCW already has one of those, so he's now Gregory Helms, which makes any new viewers of Helms think the sugar on the back of his trunk just means he really likes candy, which would at least be era appropriate, especially with Helms himself being in a boy band a year earlier. Most importantly of all though, it's the debut of WCW referee Charles Robinson, looking the same then as he does now. The match begins with the novel concept of fast and exciting action, seeing Helms fly all around while Kidman flies even higher, that is until he crashes down onto Helms at ringside. Backstage we get a look at WWF Light Heavyweight Champion X-Pac, a former Cruiserweight champ himself, looking at the TV like a normal human to scout his future opponent for the Invasion event. Helms finally strikes back by winning a do-si-do duel to hip-toss Kidman over the top rope, causing Billy to favor his knee like he's his Cruiserweight Tag Team title partner. Commentary makes WCW sound even cooler than Federation fans already think it is by getting on their hands and knees to thank Linda McMahon for a second straight show while Kidman recovers to spring off that bad knee for a bulldog back inside. The Man Kid slides home safe through the legs and connects on a nice BK bomb, but it only scores 2 as Charles Robinson either signals that or begs the crowd to show peace towards the WCW outsiders. Helms bounces off the buckles but ducks a clothesline and levels Kidman with a super kick, but it's only good for a 2 as a sign tells us Vince needs Viagra, and luckily for him, Billy Kidman is just the man to go to for that and advice on Tori Wilson. Kidman regains control with the Michinoku driver as Arn Anderson tells us he knows exactly what that's setting up, but nobody likes to know it all, Arn, okay? Just calm down. Kidman does go up as predicted, but cedes control back as he crash lands to the canvas, giving way to the Nightmare on Helm Street, which if I had an award for best move name would win that running away. But I don't, so Helms doesn't win that nor the match as the Kid kicks out, leading to Greg setting out for the soon-to-be Van Vertebreaker. Kidman gets a head start on outlawing it by turning it into a Kid Crusher, earning himself the dub, his 4th Cruiserweight title, and the distinction of being the first man to win WCW Gold on World Wrestling Federation TV. Despite an overall respectful crowd for this compact but 100 times better match than on Raw, you would know that from the cuts to the crowd afterwards with the WWF highlighted signs telling WCW in no particular order. WWF off, that there was a reason WCW went out of business, and they also caught some topless bros pissed at the tank top Kidman succeeding. But at least there was that guy from earlier who finally saw himself represented on the big stage. From Take 2 to Match 2 of WCW's night, Booker T gets his shot at redemption with the defense of the world title against DDP, who seemingly earned his #1 contender status by getting kicked in the balls by Sarah Undertaker on Raw. The hard-cam crowd signs haven't gotten any kinder between WCW's first and second matches of the night, nor is DDP, who tributes Buff Bagwell with an opening jump attack. DDP falls prey to a very poorly edited together Booker back elbow soon after, but WCW finally finds an ally with someone holding up a solid Booker T 16 sign while Page gets chopped. DDP is then smashed into the corner, but he's able to stop the onslaught and drop Booker into the buckle much cleaner than Buff did on Raw. Scott Hudson accidentally catches a DDP boot to the unpadded dome at the announce desk, where it appears the only notes given to the announcers on this WCW World title match were various issues of WWF magazine. Maybe thinking they get to beat them up, the crowd finally gets excited by WCW action when it spills into their laps like a concession stand soda, seeing Booker hit and then clothesline back inside the guardrail. DDP then takes his turn using the announce table ahead of the UPN censors, missing one very angry Tacoma Domer.
Hey, he just turned it on. I gotta tell you, he's putting it on him.
DDP comes off the top with a Kane-esque flying clothesline that only scores a 2, so maybe he should have stolen the move from the brother who held the WWF title for longer than 24 hours. It's not a last ride, but even better, DDP connects on a Liger Bomb for another 2 before paying dearly for his attempt at a Stinger Splash, and I wonder what Cash Wheeler ever did to this person in Tacoma. At least they still like his partner, though. Scott Hudson moves from hyping the brand to groveling for it to receive but merely a chance from you, the loyal World Wrestling Federation viewer, while DDP stays hunched over and suffers an axe kick as a result before getting spinneroonied on for insult to injury. Injury to the insult to the injury gets added with a kick down to the floor, but DDP strikes back with a running shoulder into the apron so hard that it turns the WCW logo into the WWF's. From the apron to the steel stairs goes Book as DDP decides he needs handheld steel as well, securing a chair and shoving Nick Patrick down for what is somehow not a DQ before landing a DD Booker TP. Not so St. Nick regains his composure and counts instead of DQing Dallas, but Booker takes it upon himself to stop DDP from winning his 4th WCW World title with a good near fall. I'm not alone in being upset with the DDP bias, as off in the distance a figure runs, well, whatever you'd call that, down in the form of The Undertaker, out for revenge on his wife's stalker and gaining some by causing an extremely anticlimactic and almost instantly forgotten roll of pretension for Booker T. DDP hits his signature WWF move, running away in terror, while back in the ring we look back to the ramp as another Fed agent hustles down with Kurt Angle trying to lay out Booker 2 shows in a row, but instead he catches that ass kick and a literal taste of the WCW World title. A WCW wrestler stands tall over a WWF Superstar TM, which I didn't know was allowed, and we get a double dose of it as we return to the Tacoma Dome parking lot with The Undertaker surrounded by several WCW badasses like Chris Kanyon and Mike Awesome. The Undertaker was also surrounded by Chavo Guerrero. Taker gets boinged out the garage door by the gang, but WCW owner Shane McMahon breaks up the assault on his corporate ministry brethren with a finger in DDP's face, which earns him an elbow to the back of the neck from his own subordinate. Shane gets bounced off the not-so-forbidden door that continues haunting WCW as Booker rushes out to save WCW's other Booker from the beatdown, prompting Awesome to tell Book he's being anything but. That causes another fight of the in-variety, sicking everyone on the champ while we see Buff Bagwell got demoted from top hat to ball cap. Booker goes from being thrown out of the door to being thrown into it, falling to the ground along with Shane and The Undertaker as DDP stands tall, SmackDown fades to black, and we're told Tough Enough is next on MTV. We are live from WWF New York in Times Square for the taped MTV Sunday Night Heat, rounding out WCW's week, which could be either spelling of the word with a tag team title tilt. It would see champion Sean O'Haire and Chuck Palumbo defend against Kanyon and Shawn Stasiak, a duo that had never teamed before in case you doubted the Vincification of WCW.
In my estimation, after watching Raw and SmackDown, WCW is inferior to WWF. I would not disagree with you in that statement.
The WWF was first introduced to exciting young athletes O'Haire and Palumbo in June as outsiders, ironic since they'd won the tag title from the insiders of DDP and Kevin Nash in January at WCW Sin. O'Haire and Palumbo debuted strong, getting their collective ass handed to them from every direction by the WWF soldiers to make you want to see them, I guess, get their ass beat again? Maybe 20 on 2 instead of just 14 on 2. The match begins with Palumbo's hops over Kanyon specifically, into a dropkick followed by a power slam to follow up the agility. Kanyon's head meets the mat in disgusting fashion courtesy of the champs, but he rebounds by blocking a hip toss to drive down O'Haire with a neckbreaker. Kanyon reaches out for the tag to bring Shawn Stasiak back to World Wrestling Federation action, last seen on Heat November 19 of '99 in another tag team contest. That one was a losing effort to the Headbangers alongside Val Venus shortly before Planet Meat was fired for his audition to join Alex Shelley in Paparazzi Productions. Shawn doesn't want to be seen by Shawn either and blasts him with a knee, but Kanyon saves him with a cool leg sweep off the middle rope to ground Chuck, who's saved by O'Haire breaking the cover. Kanyon catches Chuck again to flatline him in the middle of the ring, but Shawn puts those long elbow pads to use by breaking up another cover. Stasiak then returns to show off his power and some sting love against power plant product Palumbo with a Stasiak death drop. Kanyon tags back in, which soon allows Chuck to finally get Sean O'Haire officially back in himself, coming in WCW logo red hot with a lariat to Kanyon and some brutal spin kicks to both challengers. Chuck reminds us he has better hops than Budweiser with a combo dropkick down into the top buckle, setting up O'Haire dropping Kanyon with the intensity of an F5 tornado to secure the victory, retain the tag title, and prove superiority for the EA and spelling of Shawn. Not only did O'Haire and Palumbo do that, but all four men pull off the upset by winning the Brockberg for the best match of this week in WCW. It isn't actually too surprising when you think about it though, since a hallmark of WWF and later WWE shows is just letting talented wrestlers wrestle without getting bogged down in micromanagement. As if a hot match from the Young Guns of WCW and a sit-down with X Factor wasn't grand enough, the night only keeps getting better with the lineup awaiting us after Heat on MTV. The progress of Sunday and to a lesser degree Thursday night was all for naught though, falling to the wayside faster than the reputation of Progress Wrestling after aligning with WWE. The next night's Raw saw about 16 months of storyline unfold over 2 hours and change, with Paul Heyman infusing another WWF vs WCW war with his island of misfit toys known as ECW. About 30 minutes later, it was revealed that WCW had secretly aligned with the Tribe of Extreme to create an alliance to end WWF Mania, led by Shane McMahon and new ECW owner Stephanie L. Jackson and her customized Kangol cap. All plans for WCW as a separate touring entity were off, and no longer was Raw earmarked to be reborn as a WCW show, a concept I still can't wrap my brain around, and that was to be started by Linda McMahon divorcing Vince over the Torrie Wilson incident. Wrestling Stream's storyline was now repurposed as the latest chapter in the McMahon family saga, with the WWF turning the page just 4 months later at Survivor Series to officially close the book on WCW's storied history, though ECW did manage to Friday the 13th Part 6 itself and rise from the grave 5 years later. And as fate would have it, what building played host to ECW kickstarting its return with an expansion draft to claim WWE's Kurt Angle as its own?
And we welcome you, ladies and gentlemen, live to the Tacoma Dome.
The debate over how WCW could have lived on under the WWF umbrella has raged on for 2 decades and will continue for many more, even after my video, which is strange since whose else's opinion do you even need to hear, right? Many have questioned relaunching the brand in Washington when the next week's show is in WCW's home of Atlanta, Georgia, or why Buff Bagwell was chosen as Booker T's opponent in the all-important First Impression Showcase. Lance Storm was available and coming off a banner year where he collected the Hardcore, US, and Cruiserweight titles all at once before falling short of the Grand Slam against Booker T in a match that's still remembered today, despite WCW's best efforts during. Both are valid criticisms, but ultimately the WCW relaunch would only be as strong as the creative behind it, and the one thing made crystal clear during WCW's one-week uprising was that Vince McMahon had no interest in using the creative magic that revolutionized his company on one that he and most Federation crowds saw as a dead, second-rate brand. Many of WCW's most recognizable names were tied up in Time Warner contracts, either too rich for Vince's blood or too rich to make the wrestlers want to risk it for the unknown of a lower Federation offer, and it's hard to blame those that didn't follow DDP's lead of foregoing guaranteed money with no guarantee of your presentation once there. Lance Storm could have had the in-ring match of the year with Booker on Raw, but if it ended with a DQ that told you these guys weren't real stars like the guys attacking them, nobody would have cared. And considering how WWE treated Storm once he was a member of its own roster, I'm not sure any performance from him could have altered the Invasion's fate.
The most boring son of a bitch I've ever seen.
But I can't help but think, what if I'm wrong? But Justin, you're never wrong and your voice is so sexy. I wish I was married to you. Thank you, and I know, but let's just get hypothetical for a moment. What if there was that one magic ingredient that could have changed everything? Back on the night of the final Nitro, a former WCW World Champion was fired live on the air for the way he had scorned Vince McMahon in the past. Fast forward 21 years later where Vince also received his walking papers in a very public manner.
Capital G, double O, double N, double E. Gone.
Maybe the one who could have revitalized those 3 letters of WCW is the one that I speak of. No, it's not John Laurinaitis, who joined the World Wrestling Federation and shot up its ranks as a 2-time Senior Vice President of Talent Relations, double GM of Raw and SmackDown, reality TV star, and even pay-per-view headliner, because he too fell alongside McMahon. No, the one from WCW that I speak of who could have changed the course of history and turned WCW into a total non-stop global force of wrestling is the only one still standing as a WWE executive in 2022. Almost as if he's the chosen one.
None other than J-E-double-F. J-A-R-R-E-double-T. That's double J, Jeff Jarrett.
Ain't he great?